So it's time to retire my old workbench. This is the first outfeed table and slash workbench that I made when I first built the shop. And so it was put together kind of quick and out of the materials that we had. Now it's time to build one that will really service us and be a little bit nicer and have a few more features. So time to dismantle this. I'll reuse as much of the material as I can, and let's get at it. First thing I'm going to do is take all these screws out. Try to use up some of this conventional lumber. So this lumber that was on top of this bench was left over, like I said, from when we were building the shop. It also had a sheet of particle board on top of it that had holes in it for bench dogs. Had a couple of coats of polyurethane on it, and a lot of wax. It was actually pretty nice. Glue didn't really stick to it. It would just peel right off if you did some gluing and it dripped on there. It was not a horrible bench, but you can see it was not that well made. Became a catch-all for all kinds of junk underneath, and didn't have quite all of the bells and whistles that I was kind of hoping for. So off camera, I dadoed out, or rabbited out, these 4x4 posts or legs. This material now, these legs and these 2x4s, this was all milled from a tree that fell down in a November storm last year. We used our sawmill, we milled it, put it in a solar kiln, dried it to 9% moisture level or moisture content, and now we're able to use it to actually build something useful inside the shop, which is kind of fun. Now, would I have preferred to have or been able to make this bench out of solid hard maple or Baltic birch plywood like a lot of guys that I see on YouTube have done? Sure, those were awesome. They're beautiful benches. They're like furniture. But here in the Pacific Northwest, Baltic birch is still similar to gold, and we have plenty of Doug fir growing wild all around here. And like I said, a couple of those trees came down. We were able to mill them, some pretty nice sized trees, and got some really nice lumber out of it. We built a solar kiln last spring, modeled after the Virginia Tech solar kiln, and it works amazingly well. In just a few short weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks in the summertime when it was nice and hot and we had plenty of sun, we were pushing temperatures of 140 to 150 degrees in the kiln, and we dried that lumber from 30-something% down to 8 or 9% in a matter of, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. So now we were able to bring it in, plane it down, mill it, and it's usable lumber in the shop. We use it for building all kinds of stuff. And the interesting thing is when ripping some of the raw slabs on the table saw, there was no stress in that wood. There was no pinching at the end of the blade or twisting as it was being cut. Everything cut nice and straight and true and even and almost effortlessly going through the table saw. So that's a testament to the quality of that Virginia Tech style solar kiln. It dries the wood out without putting a lot of undue stress on it. So the other thing that we did was I was able to find some really dense particle board with a hard, almost like a formica type of a coating on it. I believe it's a melamine, but it's not like a vinyl type melamine. It's really, really hard. And so I grabbed a few sheets of that at a reasonable price, and I'm going to use that for both the shelf underneath and the top of the bench top as well. So the first thing I need to do is get our bench top size established. And I know a lot of guys have track saws to do something like this, but you know, if you've put in enough hours behind one of those skill saws, you can cut pretty much just this straight freehand. Is it easier with a track saw? I'm sure it is. I don't have one, so I don't know, but I can cut as straight as I need to just with my hands. This piece here is going to be the shelf, so I'll crawl underneath and mark the corners of those legs so I can notch it so that that'll sit down and conform around those legs down inside. Funny, when I was in college, I took construction classes, and we had one instructor and construction teacher that taught us how to plunge cut with a skill saw, and also how to cut arcs and radiuses with a skill saw. Things that we all just shook our head when he first told us what he was about to demonstrate. But then once he showed us how to do it, we were all kind of amazed and like, huh, that's not so bad. We could do that. So there's some interesting things you can do with a skill saw if you practice a little bit. So I couldn't get, this is the bottom side, the bottom facing up, and I didn't want to have those ugly crosses if you had continued with the skill saw all the way into the corner. So there was a little bit of material had to be cut out, and I used a hacksaw blade just because the material was so hard. And I have or the Japanese pull saws, but I didn't know if they would cut this material very well or if it would damage the saw. And I wanted a fine tooth that would, you know, do a nice job cutting those inside corners. Took a while, but I finally got this shelf to lay in there flat, and then was on to building the top. Now these cross pieces I had to replace. I took them out in order to be able to get the shelf in there. Off camera, or actually the battery on the camera had died without me realizing it when I was first routing these holes. So you can see the template right there, the flakeboard or OSB template. I used that to cut those initial holes, but I didn't go all the way down. My bit wasn't long enough, so I cut about halfway through, took the template off, and it's got a top bearing on that bit. So once I had established the hole, I could move the template off and then just go back in and use that part of the hole as the template and finish out the depth of cut all the way to the bottom. And these square holes or square bench dogs are a game changer from the round ones. And I've seen people use the round ones and they make them into, they use a whole pop-up thing that I'm going to do on these. But the square ones are so much better because there's things you can do, like you can remove one of the dogs and slide a T-track clamp down inside the hole and use it to clamp stuff flat down to the top of the bench in any one of those areas where there's a bench dog, or you could use several clamps if you need to. And so here I'm routing out for the router table, making the holes for the insert and for the base plate. The other thing I wanted on this bench was I wanted a router table. I have one built into the table saw wing, but it's in a spot, there's a post right next to it as part of the building. Just not convenient to use. So I wanted something that I could use that was a little bit more accessible. And there was a couple of other things that I wanted to do with that, like put some T-track alongside of it so I could build jigs that I could use on that router. And so this was an ideal time to do that. So this is the bottom. I had to hog out this material because there was a steel plate that I robbed from a commercial, I think it was a Craftsman. In fact, I could see the leg right there on top of the bench. Small router table. So I took all pieces and parts off of that were important, and use them here. And then the last thing to do is to flip the whole thing over. And this melamine, I'm telling you, I'm 6'6" and I'm still fairly strong. And this stuff was heavy, really heavy. Flipping it was a challenge. But flipped it over, set it back in place. I did install a small panel underneath where those dogs are going to be, because you'll see when I put the little pop-up spring mechanisms in them, they need something to push off of. So there has to be like a floor in there. So once the bench is kind of set and installed, the next thing to do was to make all of the bench dogs. And for those, I used 1.5 inch squares. So first of all, 1.5 inch, because 2x4s are 1.5 inch, so it's easy enough to just rip those to 1.5 inch and one cut and you're there. And then just drill out the centers for the little pin, spring-loaded pin mechanism that you can get on Amazon or any hardware store. They use them for cabinet enclosures, for those push doors that, or latches that you can just push on the door and it pops open. And so you can see, you just push those into the hole, set them down, and the bench dog will sit flush when you're not using it. And then with just a simple press on it, you can pop it up, and it pops up about 1/2 inch, which is perfect, because most material that I'm going to be belt sanding or planing or doing any work on is going to be 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch anyway. So they won't be in the way, or they won't be sticking up proud of the workpiece. And they're still, the 1/2 inch is still enough that even if you have something bigger on there, they still provide plenty of support if you're pushing against them. So we also embedded a couple of T-tracks, you can see right there alongside the router table. And those T-tracks allow, first of all, to put a fence there for the router table, or for the router. But also, anytime I wanted to build the jig, like I built and I have a video on that, that was just released, on how to build an adjustable box joint jig, and it uses those T-tracks and the ability to be able to clamp things right there on the router table. And you can see there the T-track clamp, just by removing the dog, you can do that. So overall, very happy with the way that this came out. We trimmed off the edges of the flake board with some of that. We beefed it up with some dimensional lumber and then trimmed it off with that thinner Doug fir, just to dress up the edges a little bit. We've got the grooves cut in it for the miter gauge or cross-cut sled to slide through. And you can see those T-tracks by the router, so that we can mount the fence and any jigs. So overall, very happy. It's going to be a real nice addition to the shop. If you like this video, please hit that subscribe and that like button and help us out. Thank you, and have a great day.